Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's Saturday, uh, March 2nd, 2024. And now my coffee is on its way. I got to move stuff around. And I've got papers surrounding me. Thank you, Dennis. I was busy reading and trying to make sure that I had everything set for everyone. But first, I'd like to say a word in French. Bienvenue tout le monde, puis on revient à 11 heures. Si j'ai pas de retard ici, um, on va se revoir à 11 heures en français. Merci. Okay, so anyways, as you can see, I'm kind of accusing the Canadian government of misfeasance. And I have every right to do that because I'm practicing my political and civil rights. And this is, what you have to explain to somebody when you're speaking to them, that yes, you're exercising your rights. And in Canada, we have not just our civil rights here at home in each of our provinces, and then the Charter of Rights and Freedoms at the federal level. We have what stands above all of those, which is our international human rights. Okay, and this is the Bill of Rights. And then within that, because a lot of the countries were neglecting the people's rights, they had to come up with the Syracuse Principles in 1985. Then they worked on this. And then we had a judge who also worked on the the Bill of Human Rights at the international level with the with a lot of famous people from around the world and justices, and they wrote the Syracuse Principles. Well, even the Syracuse Principles, it explains how our governments are supposed to implement our rights and what they can and can't do. Okay. And this is the basis of the Syracuse Principles. It was created to make sure that governments did not override their rights above the people, because in a democracy, the government gets its rights from the people. However, in Canada, and don't let this be confusing, in Canada, we are still under a colonialist regime. We are not a true democracy. Democracy belongs to the people, and only giving us our right to choose our next dictator is not democracy. Democracy in Canada is, it is only given to the parliamentarians, because when we vote for our politicians, we give away our rights to them to do what they want with for 4 years or till the next election, when an election is brought in. And then the next government can do whatever it wants, because the government is not supposed to be bound by a previous government. So got some hair in my eyes there. But anyways, to make a long story short, we've been ripped off. Okay. And Canada, all of the governments, at least since 1982, when we were supposed to be officially decolonized, become liberated. Was Canada ever liberated? No, because in 1931, it was a coup d'etat created by all of the heads of countries, okay, the Commonwealth realm, within the Commonwealth realm. And for all of the prime ministers, in the who made part of the realm, they're the ones who make the decisions at the international level, okay, in the Commonwealth realm, as to what the kings and queens can and can't do, how much money they're going to get, what laws they're going to pass in all of our countries, and all of this. So we need to take that out. Okay. I'm not saying that we need to come out of the Commonwealth, but what we do need to do is to remove the crown. Okay, and place the Canadian citizens, because that's what should have happened in 1982. We were not supposed to keep the Queen or a king as our sovereign, because what happened in 1982 is Pierre Elliott Trudeau, okay, like his son, stole our rights, along with all of the premiers of all the provinces. Okay, because anybody in politics should understand the people's rights, should understand international law. If you're going to be ruling a country, you need to know what you can and can't do. and what your rights are in regards to the people you are supposed to be serving. And this is why the CPU exists today. I just celebrated 15 years of this. 15 years. How long is it going to take for Canadians to realize, to wake up and smell the coffee? And then we can smell the roses because we can get rid of the stench that we have in government in regards to their policies and everything that they're bringing in that is illegal. Are they really responsible for what they're doing? Do they even know what they're doing? And this is what I've been witnessing, because the rule of law is very specific at the international level. You're supposed to create laws that are specific, that everybody can understand. Not give us the Jesuit version. Speak for 5 minutes and then still nobody doesn't understand anything. Okay? So we got to cut out the Jesuit version here of legal talk, in the sense that it needs to be short, sweet, and not sweet, but short and understandable and very clear. And you're supposed to use these words. Canada does not do that. We have one word, okay, that has been used over 2,000 times in our laws that allows for corruption when reading those laws by the governments. That is not allowed under the rule of law. So when the Canadian government says, or anybody says, oh, provincial governments or municipal, oh, we practice the rule of law. Not true. They're lying to you. Okay, we can prove that. Let them say we're wrong. I don't think so. We've got the proof. And they've been doing it for years. They've been circumventing even the legal education, the law, the education of law to young lawyers. They have subverted the law to suit their purposes. They have neglected to include the Syracuse principles and the Johannesburg's principles that clearly define our rights. And when a country signs an agreement at the international level, it binds the crown. And that's why they'll tell you, well, only another country can charge us because it's the agreement between the countries, which created the United Nations by these countries and the agreements they've signed on. And this is why you're seeing Israel finally getting brought up on the table because of of its actions. And their actions go way back to 1967, not just since October. So you need to understand the whole history there before you make judgment. And this is why the people, the Jewish people, okay, in Israel and worldwide right now, because they're being attacked, because of what the Israeli government has done. Okay, you've had enough time. Get down. I got to make sure she doesn't walk all over my computer so I don't lose you. So anyways, what the Israeli government has done, from my perspective, is invited a whole bunch of Jewish people there under false pretenses and used them against the Palestinian peoples to create civil wars within countries. And now they're creating civil wars in all of our countries because of laws like our new little justice minister is doing, okay, an attorney general. And I thought David Lametti was, a little off, not to say the least, but now this one has taken the cake, okay? We're going beyond ridiculous. And this is what we've been seeing this week, and that's why I've been really busy trying to put everything into context, because what we're doing, the CPU is doing, is making sure that all the laws are understood. We need to educate everybody in Canada, but it's hard to educate people in Canada when the lawyers are not educated either as how international law is supposed to be implemented in our country. In our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, all of the international instruments Canada has signed automatically gets embedded into our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Okay? Automatically. But because Canada has not done that, or they avoid talking about it, they are penalized at the international level if brought to justice. And it's coming. The only downfall to that is all of us Canadians and Indigenous peoples in Canada will be accused because of what our rogue governments have done in other countries. What they supplied other countries with, the monies we send to these countries. We need to stop all that. First of all, we need to stop migration ASAP, because what they're doing is they're bringing in a mix of people who are in dire need of salvation into our countries so that they can fight amongst each other. All of these peoples are being used, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, it don't matter. Whether you're white, brown, Asian, it don't matter. We're all one people. We're all humans. We need to stand together. It's like right now, the woke is being used against everybody else. We need to wake up from this nightmare, toss all of that aside, look at ourselves as human beings fighting for our freedoms and all of our rights, because we all have equal rights. Nobody has to have a right more than the other. And that's what the CPU is about. It's equal rights. Not one province should have more rights than the people in another province, or less rights, or being stopped from going from one province to the other because Canadians are Canadian. An Indigenous person in Canada has Indigenous rights right across Canada. They have the rights to natural resources, same as we do on our side. It's not the provinces that can make the decisions for the people. That's dictatorship. That's colonialism. We need to get out of that. So anyways, I'm getting off topic here again, which is normal for me if I don't watch myself. But we're going to be looking at the Syracuse Principles. But first of all, we need to understand, like a lot of people say, oh, we need to walk away from the UN and the WHO. It's all another story, because once you understand what's going on and you read the actual documents and you understand the actual documents, you're reading something totally different than what the government has just said, or public health, or whoever it is. Because first of all, the WHO cannot override our human rights, our International Bill of Rights, which includes our civil and political rights, with our human rights and our cultural rights. So they cannot override that. So all of the justices in Canada need to wake up, open their eyes, and wake the hell up. Same with every politician, every head of institutions, and every corporation, because we have rights that we could come back on them. Justice Mosley was right in regards to not being able to implement the measures. But the government tomorrow could turn around and change that law to suit itself. So where are we at? As long as the government doesn't understand who's the ones who are the idiots writing these laws right now, and yes, I'll say idiots and sue me for it, prove me wrong, with this new law that they're come out with. Seriously? This video, you can't miss this video, people. Share it, spread it, send it to Arif. He needs to have his mind cleared up of all of the BS that he's been fed in Canadian law, because Canadian law has been subverted. It's not at all what it's supposed to be. And I want to show you, first of all, we're going to start with showing you what our members at the CPU get. We have all of the international instruments that they can download and print and read and ask questions about. If they have questions, we're there to answer. Um, and it's important for everybody to know our rights, because now it's important for Canadian citizens. If you don't know your rights, they can trample all over us. And if the lawyers don't know the rights, well, what's been going on for the last 3 years in courts? When a judge says, oh, it's moot, so we don't need to judge on that. No, a crime was committed at the time. So just because it no longer exists doesn't mean they were not guilty. I mean, this goes beyond stupidity. Okay? We need to take stupid out of our existence and ignorance. So, forgive me for being so passionate about this. And thank goodness I'm not a lawyer, because I'd probably be brainwashed. Okay? And I wouldn't be able to see all the way around, because you have to have vision here. You have to have vision, not only inside of our sphere here in Canada at our little level, and then, across Canada. And then you have to look at the international sphere. What is happening right now to Israel and Palestine is unprecedented. The countries, the heads of countries are finally rising up. The people are finally rising up in other countries the way they need to be, to pressure their governments to do the right thing. And that's what we're seeing. And that's why I'm going to be posting every single episode on our Facebook page and everywhere we can, for as long as they allow us, because we've been banned everywhere and shadow banned. For you to listen to. If it takes 3 hours, take 3 hours. What else do you have better to do than to educate yourself as to what's happening globally, so that you know how to react in your own country? So this is important, very important. So anyways, we're going to be speaking about a global campaign that's going on now to save our human rights, because that is what the WEF and everybody else is trying to do. Okay, the G20, the G7 and the Commonwealth realm, all of those actors at the Commonwealth realm are the ones trying to destroy us, not just the WEF. They allow that in our countries. They're the ones pushing. So when you're seeing that an injection has now been declared to have all kinds of things in there that will make you sick and kill you, and we have twiddly-dee and twiddly-dum advertising, oh, now go and get your next shot. Those people need to be behind bars. And we'll never be able to get it done until these things are respected. We all need to know our rights, everybody, because how are we going to keep our politicians accountable? How are we going to keep justice ministers to come up with shoddy laws, draconian laws that absolutely make no sense? And they've become the thought police. We now have a thought police. They can arrest you before, if they're suspecting you of maybe having bad thoughts. We might as well just blow up the planet while we're at it, if we allow this to happen. Seriously. So first of all, I want you to understand a very important message from the UN. The UN has been fighting tooth and nail since the launch of this fake infection going around, okay? And they've been trying to wake up the governments as to what their legal requirements need to be. And as far as our rights go online, well, Arif is going to learn a very hard lesson. They cannot touch us online. We have the right. Our rights are also covered online, anywhere on this planet. So they need to start reading the information. We need to make them accountable to this information. So I want to show you a little bit of a little video that we have on our website first, just to give you an idea. Okay, because again, during all of this, the last 3 years, there's a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't allowed to be done because of what our countries have signed on to, that makes them binding on the crown for our rights. And binding on the crown, before I forget, well, to every politician in government, every senator, right down to provincial legislatures and municipal mayors and councilors, guess what? You have no immunity. And we can prove that. Why? Because because of these agreements signed in 2001. Thank you, Monsieur Chrétien. Thank you, Jean Chrétien, for having been cocky enough to say, oh, yeah, well, it's binding on the crown. This document is binding on the crown. So yeah, superior, there's no superior immunity. Okay. So if you think you're the only place the government has immunity is inside Parliament for what they say, according to what is being said in Parliament. Other than that, any messages to the people no longer qualifies. Okay. It's checkmate. It no longer qualifies. So none of you who have a power over and the Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples, you do something wrong, you have no immunity if it's against our rights. Anyways, let's get on with this. I know I'm going to be late for the French people. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. But anyways, here we go. Where's my screen share? I'm just going to make sure I'm on the right page here. Yeah, print to download and go back here. Okay, screen share. Now print to load. Okay, share. So to all of yous who are our members have finally joined our community, you'll see here that on the side, if you look at the slide here, you'll be able to see, okay, you bring this down and you'll be able to get to our videos, our print here. So you see research documents to print or download. So important human rights documents to print or download is where you're going to find this. And this is non-derogation of rights. These are the rights that the government absolutely cannot touch, not even in a war or a pandemic at all. Okay, zero tolerance there. So these documents explain our rights and what can be done or not done, such as non-derogation of rights in different circumstances. They also help governments and officials to understand that these rights must not be misinterpreted or ignored. The documents, the Johannesburg and Syracuse Principles. These principles were adopted on October 1st, 1995 by a group of experts in international law, national security, and human rights convened by Article 19, the International Center Against Censorship, in collaboration with the Center of Applied Legal Studies of the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Now, just to make everything clear, we've always had justices there during these debates and implementations. So Canada cannot say it did not know. It can't. We've had representation during the United Nations creation and the Human Bill of Rights, or human rights, and then again with our rights to civil and political rights during the Syracuse Principles, which was first created to make sure governments did not overstep, and then there's Johannesburg to further elaborate because they still couldn't understand. Okay. Now, the principles are based on international and regional law. And the reason why they say regional law and standards is because there's no such thing as provincial, having provinces in our rights. Our rights start from the national, okay? And we're all covered in the same rights. It's the rights of equality right across Canada. Therefore, when we have provinces who have different rights, that's illegal, okay? That's illegal against our rights. Because the provinces could give us more rights than the international rights if it wanted to, but not less rights. So international first and then national after. okay, as to what the Canadian government has signed and agreed upon, or the UK government, because we're still based technically under the UK, and I'd love to be challenged on that one in court, okay, by somebody who would like to sue me about that, and then they'd have to prove that I'm wrong. So another reason why they won't touch us, because we're going to win. That fact. So until the Canadian citizens have a referendum in the Indigenous nations, and we remove the king and queen, now it's the king, but any of the imperial monarchy from our system, our constitution, and put the people in power, that's only when we will have our rights recognized since 1960, the way they should have been, and it still has not been done. So we have the right to be the official head of state, and nowhere does it say that our government has a right over us. Nowhere in international law. It says we have to have a government, but the government works for the people, not a dictatorship. We have the right to determine what the government can and can't do, what kind of system we want. And it's not about China right now. If we take all of this stupid out of our governance, we should be able to get back to something normal, and then have the people involved in some of the decision making that is warranted when you have stuff that are going to change our policies and interfere in our daily lives that affect everybody across Canada and the Indigenous nations. So we need to bring that back. So I'm going to continue on here. The principles are based on international and regional law and standards relating to the protection of human rights. So all the way down from national, provincial, and municipal, our rights, our international law rights count. Okay? So evolving state practice as reflected inter alia in judgments of national courts. So national courts have to adopt all of those rights. Okay? And then provincial and municipal. And the general principles of law recognized by the community of nations. These principles acknowledge the enduring applicability of the Syracuse Principles on the limitation and derogation provisions in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the Paris Minimum Standards of Human Rights Norms in a state of emergency. And this is where Justice Mosley got his information and what he's come up with. So this is the file on principles, limitation, derogation provisions in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights by American Association for the International Commission of Jurists. And these were all jurists that created this. Okay, so they can download the Syracuse Principles here, and then the Johannesburg Principles on national security, freedom of expression, and access to information. Now, this was used in Africa in regards to Pfizer and having all of the, everything blacked out under the freedom of information was illegal. And Pfizer had to remit all of the documents because a government is not allowed to agree to a contract that is going to be deemed that they have to protect the patent rights or whatever of whoever they're hiring. Whoever they're hiring has to agree that the Canadian citizens have the right to all of those public documents. Those become public documents and they're not allowed to be blacked out unless it's for national security to a certain point. Then they could be blacked out. But Pfizer's documents were not fall under national security. It has to be our national security, not the security of the corporation that wants that contract. And then that they can order our government under their own contract. It's the other way around, people. The other way around. So now I'm going to come here and show you this.
Governments are facing formidable challenges to protect people from COVID-19. I'm a physician, I've been Minister of Health, President of the Republic. I know that these kind of measures are needed. But the emergency power some governments have adopted should not be used as a weapon to quash dissent, control the population, and even perpetuate their time in power. Exceptional measures should be used to cope effectively with the pandemic. Nothing more, nothing less. Under human rights law, states are able to restrict some rights to protect public health. They also have broad powers if a state of emergency is declared. But the restrictions need to be necessary, proportionate to the need, non-discriminatory, and time-limited. Certain rights, including the right to life, the prohibition of torture and ill treatment, and the right not to be arbitrarily detained, can never be set aside under any circumstances. Police and security forces in some countries have used excessive and sometimes lethal force to make people abide the lockdowns and curfews. Shooting someone for breaking a curfew because they are desperately searching for food is clearly unacceptable and unlawful. So it's making it difficult or dangerous for a woman to get to a hospital to give birth. In some cases, people are dying because the way the measures supposedly put in place to save them are being applied. So to help states in the response to COVID-19, the UN Human Rights Office has issued new guidance on exceptional and emergency measures. Our guidance stresses that law enforcement officials should only use force when strictly necessary. Some countries have introduced measures and laws that refer to vaguely defined offenses. Some are detaining people for breaking lockdowns, thereby adding to congestion in prisons. This risks making the pandemic worse. So I'm concerned that such measures and laws may also be used to muzzle the media and detain critics and opponents. It is important to counter misinformation about COVID-19, as this poses a huge risk to people, but so do bad policy decisions. Shutting down the free exchange of ideas and information undermines trust and may damage the effort to contain COVID-19 and its harmful socioeconomic effects. We have seen many states adopt justifiable, reasonable, and time-limited measures. But there has been worrying cases where government appeared to be using COVID-19 as a cover for human rights violations, restricting fundamental freedoms from civic space, and undermining the rule of law. Exceptional measures and state of emergency should be independently reviewed and subject to proper and regular parliamentary, judicial, and public oversight. It is clear states need additional power to cope with this crisis, but the abiding principle must be that exceptional measures are enforced humanely. If the rule of law is not upheld, then the public health emergency risks becoming a human rights disaster, and the negative effects will long outlast the pandemic itself.
Okay, so now you see. So that was a very important message because, um, the Syracuse principles and the Johannesburg's principles is actually, how can I say, used to be able to clarify things that our government or our justices will have problems with assessing, especially in Canada, since they don't know anything. So here you'll see emergency measures, COVID-19, and then non-derogation files. And in that we have declarations. We have some of them in French, but we don't have all of them in French. Okay. So this is for our members where they can go and get these documents. And then we'll be adding the other ones a little bit later. So I'm going to do the stop sharing right now on that one. Okay. Come back here and then search for my document for the Johannesburg principles. Yeah, right here. Okay. So this is the Johannesburg principles. I'm just going to bring that up all the way here. So the Johannesburg principles on national security, freedom of expression, and access to information. So this is exactly where this law, this crazy law that Arif is coming out with in regards to online protections. And they always use the fact that, oh, it's for our protection. Listen, let the people decide what's for our protection. And then we have to have people really understand that just because you feel a certain way doesn't give you the right to impose that on somebody else. um, but if the majority thinks of a certain way, or we have rights, we're not allowed to remove rights that we already have, to allow other rights to interfere, like with the trans issue, and sex changes and all this. Who pays for that? If they want something done, well, it shouldn't be at the cost of the Canadian population, or taking away monies from the Indigenous peoples. That's your choice. Whatever floats your boat. Hey, uh, that has nothing to do with anybody else. But if you want something done, then you can't impose that on everybody else. It should not. It's like teeth, right? So we all have the same dental care, and that the government will fork out. If it doesn't fork out things for cosmetics, then uh, then we don't get it. We have to pay for that ourselves, and whatnot. So all of these things come into play, and we really got to stop and think before we take action. Or the government cannot go ahead and create laws, should not go ahead and create laws that, first of all, are illegal, second, against our rights, do not protect all of our rights, and are using ambiguous words that can allow them access to corruption within those laws. So all of this needs to be brought back to the table, and this is what's happening at the international level in regards to Palestine and Israel. And this is why it's so important that we all watch this, because finally, since 1960, and all of these things coming out, that the international has been trying to stop Israel, but it's kind of because of the United States having veto rights in regards to NATO, and what happens to Israel. Well, the United States, any veto country who participates in an act of genocide or against crimes against humanity within another country, should lose its veto rights. And this is why it's so important that we participate at the international level to bring this about. Because seriously, I mean, none of these countries who have veto power at under within NATO and the Security Council should have the right to vote or to veto when all of the countries stipulate something. Okay, so all the countries voted to stop the war by Israel against the Palestinians, and and then they'll deal with the issues. But the bombing needed to stop, and then the United States kept it going under false allegations, or manufactured allegations. Um, but anyways, it's really important that we all understand what's going on there, so that we see how it affects all of our countries. Because now Canada can get, once it's obvious genocide is being created. So once that gets totally determined in court, then Canada's going to be charged along with the United States and the UK for crimes of genocide against the Palestinian people. So it doesn't matter whether Canada sends tons of aid to Palestine to cover itself, to pretend that it's on the right side of justice here, and then to beg for a seat at the United Nations Human Rights Committee, which should be stopped, and which is something that, until Canada cleans it, what it has done to the Indigenous peoples here and to the Canadian citizens, especially during the last 3 years, it has no business sitting on the at the international level on the Human Rights Committee. No business. What it's been doing for years in other countries, it has no business, because Canada is a full participant in all of these atrocities worldwide. Okay, so not in my name. Okay, if Canada want to create that, but now they've created all of these things, in the name of Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples in Canada, and that reflects on us. And it's time that we stop them from doing things in our names when these things are illegal and are murdering people. What they did with the vaccinations, they were not allowed to touch our genome. They were not allowed to force us, or to force people for employment into getting, injections, no matter what. We have rights. They overrode those rights. And now who's going to pay the price for all of the legal um, court cases that are going to come about? When you sue the government, you sue Canadians, and Indigenous peoples get less money as well. You have to understand what our actions, what our government does is our reflection. We are in the mirror. When you look at the Canadian government photos, there's two mirrors. There's the Queen. Well, now it's going to be the King, the members of Parliament, and two mirrors on each side. And we're stuck in this mirror. That's black magic, people. Okay. So this was created, Article 19 was created November of 1996. And here it says these principles were adopted on October 1st, 1995 by a group of experts in international law, national security, and human rights convened by Article 19, the International Center Against Censorship, in collaboration with the Center for Applied Legal Studies of the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. The principles are based on international and regional law and standards relating to, I've already read this, obviously. Okay, so we're just going to go, sorry about that. Now, and these principles were, again, accepted 1996, 1998, 1999, 2001. Canada cannot say it did not know, okay? Because every country gets these. Now, when you look at the contents, I'm not going to read you all of these things. Here, why is it important for you guys to read this? Freedom of opinion, expression, and information prescribed, and what's prescribed by law. And by law means they have to make an actual law for it, not just a recommendation, or it has to be an official law, and it has to be very well crafted and not confusing at all. So here you have protection of a legitimate national security interest, necessary in a democratic society. So these are all the titles that they give you: legitimate national security interest. Well, what do they mean by that? This is where the Justice Mosley got them on, okay? States of emergency, prohibition of discrimination. There's prohibitions on our rights, but not all of our rights. There's some that they can derogate from. Others they absolutely cannot, not even under the threat of national security or a war or emergency measures. So restrictions on freedom of expression, protection of opinion, expression that may threaten national security, protected expression, use of a minority or other language, unlawful interference with expression by third parties, restrictions on freedom of information. Now, general rule on access to information, narrow designation of security exemption. And we're just going to keep going down here. Okay, the rule of law and other matters, general rule of law protections. What are the remedies? Right to trial by an independent tribunal, prior censorship. So now when we have Doug Ford, another Tweedledee, along with, the others, saying that he's going to pick justices that are more in line with, all think along the same lines. Well, excuse me, just because he's pissed off because a judge actually, followed the rule of law and made a good judgment, now he's pissed off. Oh, now he's going to get judges that think like him or force them to think like him? Excuse me. The justice system is supposed to be independent from government. And this is where the minister, even in the UK, you don't have the same minister of justice and you don't have the same attorney general. Here in Canada, we have a politician who is the minister of justice and the auditor of Jesus, I just said it. Attorney General, sorry. So the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice is not supposed to be the same person. But yet in Canada, that's a paradox, people. Okay, it should even stand in law because he's not supposed to be political, and yet he is. When you read about who the Minister of Justice is, or the Attorney General, actually, the Attorney General title, he's supposed to be nonpartisan. What the hell is going on in Canada? Don't you care? Don't you think this would make a difference if this was cleared up? It would. Now, these principles here are important because, again, they reiterate the same thing here. Um, but they are actually the what did Allison? Allison was in court in Manitoba, and she had mentioned one of the lawyers for JCCF, and she says, there's got to be. She asked the judge. She says, there's got to be something that determines how to use, the charter and what's included and what rights and what's right and what's not right. And I kept telling her, use the Syracuse principles. It was never used in that court case. Why? I don't know to this day. We've sent it to the lawyers that were in Ottawa defending the people from the convoy. I've never heard it being used. I've never heard it even anywhere. So why, so to answer the why was because these lawyers think that they're not allowed to use our international law rights because a law hasn't been specifically created in Canada. That's BS. That's BS. Because international laws that our federal government, which is in charge of even the provinces are not, even though the Justice Wagner says the provinces are sovereign. That's BS. He's BSing you, and that man needs to lose his job. Okay? That man needs to lose his job. Because some of the things that has been said, they can get charged with base. What's the word is misrepresentation of the law. Okay. So misrepresentation of the law by anybody in government or anybody at the within the justice system can be brought up on that. So now we're still just looking at what effect that has at the international level, because the international judges are also appalled at what's happening in some of the countries. So because they fall under them, we don't know what can transpire from that. So we're still trying to figure that out. So now it's 10:49, but I'm supposed to get going here to get prepared for the French one. But it's just to give you an idea that the principles here, Principle 1, freedom of opinion, expression, and information. Everyone has the right to hold opinions without interference. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression, which includes the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in printing, in writing, or in print in the form of art, or through any other media of his or her choice. The exercise of the rights provided for in paragraph B may be subject to restrictions on specific grounds and established in international law, including for the protection of national security. Now, there are different things that you can and can't do, because you can't incite a war by, doing something that'll upset another country. There are limits to what you can say, and then when you look at hate speech, well, they can't base it on, their opinion of what hate speech is. There's got to be, they have to explain exactly what they want to be considered hate speech, and it has to be classified as hate speech. So where does it get declassified from hate speech and the public opinion? And when you're telling the truth, well, I've seen a lot of truths come out and then be accused of anti-Semitism or, being against Muslims or whatever. Truth is truth. It has nothing to do with either of those things. So hopefully truth will prevail in all this, and the people will see themselves as being used. So it's not just the people of Palestine we need to protect right now. It's also the Jewish people in Israel, in Palestine. So they're being used, and that's why we need every Jewish person, everybody on this planet, to look at how they're being used by governments to create chaos. And as long as we feed into that, we'll never be able to see the light through this tunnel. We'll never be able to get at the end of the tunnel to see the light. So we the people need to be to create how can I say, an intervention. We are the intervention to corruption in Canada. We have to keep our justices in line. We have to keep our lawyers in line. We have to keep our police in line. We have to keep our governments in line, and all levels, all politicians, from the federal to municipal, and the corporations who are taking advantage of, who think that they can create policies against the workers and the clients coming in. Your policies do not override everybody else's human rights, whether they're an employee or a client or somebody coming in to your shop. Doesn't give you the right to dictate. Human rights dictates what you can and cannot do. Okay, so that's why Article 19 here um, is so important. Spreading this information out, letting people know that the Syracuse principles and the Johannesburgs is there to protect us from our rogue governments. And we need to implement that. And now we are trying to make sure that at the international level, now that the countries are waking up to the atrocities being done on a world stage, especially by the United States, the UK, Canada, and Israel, and everywhere else on this planet. So you've got hypocritical governments who will accuse one or the other of doing certain things when they all along do it themselves. So now hopefully all of the countries will be able to sit down, relook at what they've signed, and start honoring them. But it's going to take the people to create interventions worldwide to make sure that our rights are protected, and that governments cannot just do what they want. They have to implement the rights of the people above themselves, where we have a veto over our government who has gone rogue. We do not have that. It is our right to get that. And that's what the CPU is about. It's about getting our rights above government to make sure that the government knows what it can and can't do against us. We own the natural resources, us and the Indigenous nations here. The Indigenous nations have a right to an equal partnership in Canada, and to be able to decide what we want together, and how we're going to move from this, and how we're going to clean this mess up that they've done within 3 years. Because the purpose of the G7 countries is to turn all of the major countries into third world countries. And it's easier to bring in a whole bunch of people who are fighting each other at the international stage, and then bring them inside of our communities and have them, I mean, Canada, the amount of theft, nobody's really vetted. Who are they bringing into our country? Do they understand the laws here? Do they have proper accommodation? Do they have proper food? To education? Is everything provided to them so that they're not frustrated, or that they have to, start creating crimes? The levels of crimes created in all of the major countries is just unbelievable. Now people are starting to turn around and throw the migrants out and immigrants out. And, where are these people going to go? Right now, there's chaos. It's up to us to come together, to all understand that we're all under the same area, and we need to help each other out. But we can't be taking advantage of one another or create crimes. So we need to do something, and we need to do it fast. So please join the Canadian People's Union. Come and get your documents, read them, print them, share them, learn them. We need to get together to force our lawyers and our police departments, our municipal departments, everything involved, to understand our rights. And then they will understand their rights within their job description. And then they'll be able to know what they can derogate from, what they can't derogate from in certain situations. Okay. So, anyways, I will leave you with that. A lot of these things are important for you to read. I didn't want to go down through it all. It's long. So what I'll do is I'm going to start making more live streams during the week now, to be able to give you the information, because there's a lot. So I'm going to have to do live streams on this specific information. But at the same time, we're, in our members meetings, if you join the People's Union, because as many people as we can join, we need to surpass the amount of people in politics under the political parties. So we need to expand our membership hugely right now. And we have a chance of changing things for Canada and doing it from the international level, because from inside out it's hard, but we need to do it from inside out, but also from the outside at the international level, and that's what we are focused on. So please join the Canadian People's Union, and I'm going to leave you with a little bit of housekeeping before we leave. I'm just going to stop share here, and come back here, because I know I've been talking through a little screen there. But anyways, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We see it at the CPU. We see it at the international level. Things are turning around, and finally, we're going at. They're coming up with ways on how countries, rogue governments, are going to be punished at the international level. The sad part is that we get punished too, because if embargoes are being done, it's the people that they punish. And if you look at World War II, a lot of people died from starvation created by embargoes, food from going into the country, exactly what they're doing to Palestine. A lot of people died of starvation more than anything else in World War II and World War I. So let's not create a third World War. They're trying to. They're using us to do it. They're using different aspects to make people argue together. So now the trans, everybody, the Jews, the Muslims, you name it, we need to get together and see that, yes, we're being used by these shoddy governments and elites who are trying to control this planet, throw us into chaos, turn us into third world countries, and not allow them to do it. We know what they're looking for. They're looking for the end game of a World War III by 2025. So, in 2025, the United States is saying that they're going to be at a full outright war. Well, now Russia is helping Iran fight against Israel, who's trying to cause shit, excuse my language, cause stuff there. And because we don't know the whole story, everybody needs to stop these wars, take a deep breath, and let's start communicating, because that's the only way that we're going to resolve anything in the end, is discussion. Okay. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Stay tuned for more of our videos. I'm going to do videos on the Syracuse principles, and then one on the Johannesburg's principles, and how we can combine all of those things. And because we're trying to enforce those as well to the 50 countries that have that were in court last week. But we're also going to be showing you all of the footage from the International Court of Justice, so that you can start understanding what they're talking about, because there's very important videos that you need to see what's been said at the international level. Okay, so take care. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we're going to be able to get everything back on track, where people have respect for one another and nobody is walking on anybody else's toes. Everybody needs to have respect. Okay, and there's a good way of doing it without frustrating everybody, and without, everybody can have rights the fair way, not the way the governments have been doing it, because it's to create chaos amongst us, and everybody's getting attacked. You don't need to get attacked for thinking what you think or how you feel, because you do have those feelings, but there's a way around it where everybody can agree. Okay, and everybody can be protected. And what destroys evil? Love, appreciation. Love the human race. Let's bring back the human race to sanity, and get rid of what is ailing us in our governance, in our politics, and make sure that our politicians are educated, because that's the purpose of the CPU, is to educate our politicians on our rights and for them to actually implement our rights. Okay, so take care. Bye-bye.
Dive into 2024 with the CPU's Dynamic campaign, set to energize Quebec and Ontario by reaching 75,000 homes with our empowering message. Every contribution you make is pivotal, driving this ambitious initiative forward and ensuring our information lands directly in communities via Canada Post. We extend special thanks to our dedicated CPU members, whose grassroots efforts amplify our reach. This campaign is your gateway to being part of a significant movement for change. Whether you choose to donate or volunteer, your participation is key to our success. Join us in making 2024 a victorious year for collective freedom and community action with the CPU.